have a little conversation. There's nothing else.
Maybe I could mug the camera.
Yeah.
Like the giant dwarf in the D&D film. Oh, he was dreadful.
He's like 4 feet wide.
I know. He was, what a terrible film that was.
All right, one formality. You're going to have to say your full name and then spell it for us just so we get everything.
Okay. My full and complete name is Ernest Gary Gygax. ERNEST GARY GYGAX. Pronounced in Switzerland Gygax.
Gygax.
But we've Americanized it to Gygax. At least my branch of the family has.
Is it German?
The Swiss.
Swiss German? Swiss.
Actually, it comes from long before that. It comes from the Greek word gigantus, for giant, because family legend says that we're all descendants of Goliath. So yes, after David cruelly slew our heroic ancestor, they ran away and ran to the islands in the Mediterranean, Crete and Eos, and then ended up in Thessalonica. 4 of the brothers, Gygax, I don't know what they're probably called Gigantus then, got permission to sail through the Mediterranean out beyond the Pillars of Hercules. They sailed all the way around the coast of Europe and to northward and then eastward, shipwrecked in the Skagerrak, managed to get back overland, and on the way back to Macedonia, they spotted the Swiss mountains and said, whoa, we'd like to live there. So the king of Macedonia gave them permission to move their families into the mountains. Then the story goes that as they were into the mountains, they said, oh, look, there's even nicer land over here to the west. And they started to move down, but lots of soldiers in red were coming and conquering the land, so they moved back. And so they're into the Bern, what's now Canton Bern. So the family hit Switzerland, according to family legend, around the time of Julius Caesar.
Well, his adventures in the blood.
That's right.
What we're doing for this documentary is we're looking at the creative aspects surrounding Dungeons and Dragons role-playing
yes.
in general. And we can't talk about the creative aspects without the creator.
Thank you.
Let's start with the growth of D&D. It started from miniatures gaming, from wargaming.
Yes.
And added role-playing elements.
Right, it started from the chainmail fantasy supplement.
So what are your thoughts on how role-playing developed out of a tabletop game rather than, say, role-playing coming from, say, actors or sociologists or something more of a social field?
Oh, well, gaming, even tabletop gaming, is a very social activity. And normally, regular military miniatures gamers play roles. I mean, if it's the commander, and sometimes they would even dress up, in uniform to when they're commanding a side. And having elements, you usually have your command figure on the table as well. So it's sort of a natural step to go from planning a military miniatures battle and assigning sides and having command figures, and particularly in 1-for-1, to start playing the role. When you're moving your command figure, you are indeed playing the role of that guy. Come on, man. And I had when we played Napoleonics, I had Brunswick figures, Braunschweig. So I painted my little fellow head looked like an Oscar Mayer sausage with a yellow band, because Braunschweiger held up to inspire his men. And I would pipe them into battle with an Oscar Mayer weenie whistle, toodle, 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 toodle. And everybody would laugh because the morale of the Brunswick troops was often bad, and I would fail the morale check, and they'd be running away, and I'd be leading them, and come rally my men. Here's our Braunschweiger.
It's like a performance thing.
Oh, sure, right.
You're saying Dungeons and Dragons is kind of a performance art.
Yeah.
How is that?
Well, I don't think it's a game, and it's not really performance. Performance is part of the game. There's strategy in the game. There's building. There are many elements, and certainly assuming a role and playing it is part of it, an important part of the game. But there are role players who don't really get into role playing much, just as there are role players who really don't get into gaming much, just mainly are doing amateur theatrics as their, so there's a wide spectrum of elements within the role playing game.
Well, role playing is used as a teaching tool in many ways. So, like by assuming a role, things like that, would D&D have a way to deliver a message, to teach?
Well,
ethics?
it certainly does. I mean, there are many. I get many fan letters saying how it's taught them, many things, improve, just in the reading, to interpersonal, communications. But first and foremost, if it wasn't a fun game, people wouldn't do it. So I don't want to try, to make it a learning tool primarily. Learning comes happily as a secondary effect to it. Vocabulary is increased. They understand basic mathematics, often, geometry, figuring out, the cubic, the volume of a sphere when they're throwing a fireball, so that they don't get caught in the backlash. So,
fireball in the 10 by 10 room.
Yes.
Can you give us an example of one of these fan mails, what they said they came away with it outside from basic gaming enjoyment?
Oh, well, first of all, the main thing is that they made friends that have lasted a lifetime. Numbers of people have said, that's where I met my wife. Occasionally, my husband, gaming. Then so the number of people who were dyslexic, who said that they got their dyslexia was overcome easily because of their desire to play games. A number of people who didn't really read much and found that they just love reading. One young man wrote, and he said he'd always been torn between wanting to do games and being, and this wasn't D&D, this was a science fiction game. And he said he, was interested in both computers and medicine. And he decided that's what he would combine the two interests. I hadn't heard, but he was just entering school then. So it's encouraged people to get into all sorts of higher learning. And the main thing is wow, what great times I had. I'll never forget them. They said the nostalgia that comes back when they remember the fun that they had with their player group and how. And what fun, many a person has written to me and said, yes, I've just gotten in touch with all my old player group, and it's just great. We're going to get playing again.
All right, well, back to the fun part. You started with the wargaming, but even before that, we did a little background on you. You were even designing stuff, an elaborate Cops and Robbers version.
Oh, yeah. Well, I wasn't really designing it. I just got to play in it, and it really... my next-door neighbors were the Rashes. They lived very close to the house in Lake Geneva. And John Rash was a boy my age, a few months younger. And his older brother, Jim, was 7 years older than John and I. And Jim got rheumatic fever and had to be in bed, and so he got bored. And, of course, John and I and Don Kay would be coming over and to play, Cops and Robbers or whatever. And he said, no, that isn't the way to do it. Here, what you need to do is, what's your name? And so he had us fill out. He had printed up little ID cards, and we had old wallets and hats. We had some, if we were playing private detectives particularly, old fedoras to wear, and model guns and holsters. And there was money, and I never forget the money because it was huge stacks of money. It looked quite good, but it said worth $1 at the turkey auction sometime in 1938 it was, or in the 30s, not 38. but he had written over it with India ink, so that there were $1 bills, ones, twos, 5, 10s, all the way up to $50,000 bills. And of course, costume jewelry, so that if we were robbers, you get the money, and if otherwise we get paid when we had to do things like if we were going to go to the saloon, you'd have to buy your drink, or you're buying dinner, and you'd get paid. We would play crime photographers sometimes with cameras. I remember I got in big trouble because I sold the same photograph to 2 newspapers. And so he was pretty cruel. If you did something and got thrown in jail, or you got shot and killed, you would go home. Say, so we were very careful. It was no bang. You thought before you drew your weapon or did something silly. Well, it was all pretty silly, really. We call it, realistic gaming.
That's great.
It was just so much fun.
Down the road, then?
Oh, that was, I really forgot about it until after role-playing. And somebody said, well, where did the idea come from? And I got to thinking about it, and I said, well, Jim Rash was probably, because he was the first game master that I know of. And he did just marvelous job. He had a dashboard for an automobile when we play in the basement. There was a place that was not fully dug out, so there was a ledge that you could sit on, and that was the seat of the car. And you'd put the dashboard and the steering wheel there that would turn, and it could also be the dashboard of He had a couple of airplane dashboards, and there were rudder pedals. And when you stepped on the left rudder, the dashboard tilted to the left because there was string on it, and then you'd have to, bring it back to the right to get it on even keel. So we would be flying planes with one had a joystick and one had a little half wheel with the Grumman Widgeon. So we were learning. Jim was interested in airplanes and photography, so that's why we had old cameras to play with and the dashboard, and we'd have to set the throttles the right way and do. So we actually were learning how, flying, the instruments and so forth, because he would use them to train himself.
So you've got definitely a good learning base as a side effect even of
that's
D&D and gaming. What would you say is then the real enjoyment of Dungeons and Dragons?
The fraternity, the fellowship of, the imagination. Your imagination goes, and you're living in, lots of, there's this constant danger of the game and new things, all imaginary, of course, but those are what really whets your appetite for the action and adventure to come.
Well, you founded an industry. So what are your thoughts about then and now, where it's going?
Well, it seems that as far as role playing, the gamers are sort of getting forgotten in the rush to fill the market and keep companies going. But there's nothing bad about that, because competition gives the gamers a lot more choice. They just have to. It's now very much caveat emptor. There's so much on the market. There was a time when a dedicated role player could go out and collect everything that was around, but it would take a independently wealthy person to do that these days.
How's Gord at Greyhawk doing?
Gord is supposed to be coming out as an illustrated novel.
Really?
Yes, graphic novels coming. Well, they should have been out late last year, and then they were due to launch at the Chicago Comic Con, which is a good thing. It would have been, I think it's running next week, and I'd have been awfully tired going there to promote it. But the publisher is having some problem with inkers and illustrators, so it looks like we're going to launch it in December. I can't say more. I shouldn't even be talking about it now.
Was he your PC, or was he...
No, he's a regular. It's a regular small comic publishing group.
What
Well, Gord himself was Gord. Yeah. No. Gord was just simply a figure for for dramatic purposes.
Oh, really?
Yes, created out of whole cloth. You know, there were a few of the other characters in the book were actual player characters from the game. Melf was there. Curly Greenleaf was one of my characters.
Who was one of your favorites?
My favorite is Mordenkainen is my
really?
favorite. Yeah, he's my. Yeah, I had more fun with him than anything else.
In what way? Why is he?
Oh, because he was always turning the tables on the game master. We would. One of my favorite tricks was when I managed to capture and subdue a small dragon, red dragon, and we put him in a wagon and pretended to be merchants, and then went and trolled for bandits and various brigands and so forth.
With the dragon.
And the dragon would come out. We'd whip the cover off the wagon. The dragon would come out. We'd throw the magic spells going at we'd beat up and loot the bandits. I thought it was very fun. Go close to the shore so you get some waterborne pirates. My DM hated that.
Why did he hate it?
Well, because I was taking advantage of getting the power gaming for the most amount of treasure, but I had to do that because Mordenkainen had large armies he had to support. We would go and loot. We would demand cities. Give us a certain amount of gil. We're like Dane Guild. Yeah, so that we wouldn't attack them, and we'll keep the bandits away. And if the city resisted, we would just have to go in and take what we wanted. But we always were very careful to kill all of the evil priests and bad guys in the city, so that we wouldn't go evil, because we were a neutral group.
Oh, you stay straight neutral?
Yes.
Is that your favorite gaming alignment then?
No, I have none that
That's the role.
Right.
Anything you want to add?
No, I think that covers that part.
But did you use miniatures when you play?
Did we use miniatures? Not often. We'd pretty much gotten miniatures out of our system on the tabletop, playing chainmail fantasy miniatures, and usually, of course, too, when we had groups of 15 or 20 people sometimes playing, it was a little confusing to try to get miniatures on there. So we just say, well, this die, everybody put a die up there, and that will be your figure, and we'd write down marching orders. Just number, like I still do. I number around the table clockwise, starting from my left, and then roll a D6 or a D8 or whatever to find out which of the PCs is being struck. Oh, let's see, its numbers 3, 4, whatever. So miniatures are nice, and we've got, and sometimes we'll use them, but Aristotle said that the tragedy in poetics, that spectacle was the least element of the tragedy. So, and some of our games are pretty tragic.
What example?
When everybody's in a bad mood, and you don't feel like game mastering very much, you get some pretty. But then we spend time telling jokes and war stories.
I know that because sometimes my sessions are not.
Yeah, they just right. Yeah, nobody feels much like playing, or they do. I was playing one game where it was a modern horror, and they had done everything, and they'd finally come to it was the denouement, and they'd found the witch who was going to sacrifice this woman, which was going to raise this demon, which would bring evil to the whole area. And they had to stop the witch from killing, sacrificing the woman. And she was on the altar, and so when the witch didn't, they shot the witch, and she didn't immediately fall. They shot the sacrifice. so that that way the witch won't be able to sacrifice her, right? Which they just did the job for, the whole campaign out the window. We played that for probably 6 months, and I just shook my head. That I dismissed the group, and most of them never came back. I said, that was the most stupid thing. I can't believe you'd do it.
Well, every adventure fails on first contact with the PC. They'll do the most random thing.
Right. Well, that was just plain. I couldn't believe it. No thought whatsoever.
When I'm gaming, I try and tailor my adventures towards my players. Do you find yourself doing the same thing?
Absolutely, sure. You're there. The game is the interaction of the game master and the players, and so the more you tailor your adventure to what they prefer, the better the game gets, and the more enjoyment it is for the game master. Sure, of course I do that.
And the flip side of that, though, is what do you pull out of it from the game master?
Oh, I have as much fun, interacting with the players, testing them, trying to second guess them, so that when they do something that they think will be right, it's wrong, seeing if I can trick them. But feeling very, kind of almost proud of them after they've, it's like a teaching sometimes with me.
I know this.
Yes, right. That's right. And when they do it with particular panache, you say, "Well, they're really getting good." So yeah, that's and it's the fun. I can imagine being in that situation. And I'm using my imagination as much as they are in describing and doing the setting and playing the role of monsters.
Attention Game Fest attendees. The auction that's going on in room 201A will be starting in approximately 10 minutes. So make sure you get your items down there.
Yes.
Thank you.
Maybe
One more request. I brought a first edition player's handbook.
Sure. In fact, I think this is about the time I'm supposed to be here. Oh yeah, I forgot the time.
Excellent. That's
This
some
is the
good
time
information.
I'm supposed to be autographed.
Is it 11 already?
Well, I'm getting toward that.
3 minutes. Yeah. So.
I have a fairly decent time sense. This is Dave Trampier's work. I like to show people. You notice, if you look at these guys, almost all of them look alike, with the exception